What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's. You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker, try that spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's, a participating U.S. Wendy's. So it's Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's. Obviously, it's just Spencer. There's no Andy this week. Andy is taking some time off because the Buckeyes have the idle week. The Buckeyes are going to take some time off this weekend, but before they do, they hit the practice field for a few different days. This week, they're picking up the pieces after, of course, the 32-31 loss to Oregon. So you're going to get me for a half hour. I'm Spencer Holbrook, or for maybe even an hour. Who knows? It depends on what the questions are, how many people are active in the comments. We're just going to chat about the Buckeyes. If you guys have questions, make sure to put them in the comments. I wanted to start this off with a couple things that I thought were interesting that Ryan Day mentioned during his radio show on Thursday. From the first time he's talked really since the loss to Oregon, he did speak on the roundtable for about 7 minutes on 97.1 The Fan on Monday night. But Thursday was really the first time he has spoken. The media did not talk to Ryan Day this week. From what I understand, it was a planned idle week, I guess, for the media as well. So it's not that Ohio State was hiding from anything or trying to avoid the media after the 32-31 loss out in Eugene. But, we did get an hour or about 35 minutes of insight from Ryan Day today, Thursday. The first thing that I wanted to mention, obviously, Josh Simmons, Will Kasmerick, both. The headliner of that group that's injured, of those two, is left tackle Josh Simmons. Potential second-round pick, maybe first round if he continued to play well. Made the AP second-team All-American list on Thursday from the midseason list. He is likely out for the season. Will Kasmerick, Ryan Day did say, guys like Josh and Will, talking about Simmons and Kasmerick, it'll be a while. We expect Josh Simmons to be out for the season. Ryan Day said right after the game it looked like it was season ending. Kasmerick saw the sling after the game down near the media area as the team was loading up the buses. Haven't gotten any word on him, but the fact that Ryan Day said he'll be out a while, I wonder if there's some optimism that he could come back this year. But for now, it's going to be on the depth. And Ryan Day did say during his radio show on Thursday, it's why you have to build depth. You knew this was going to happen midway through the season. A couple guys will get back for sure. Other guys like Josh and Will, it'll be a while. That's not what you want if you're Ohio State. You obviously want to be able to go, against Nebraska and, of course, against Penn State. And then the Indiana game that all of a sudden looks interesting and the Michigan game at full strength. You want to be able to go into the college football playoff healthy. But, guys, this is football, and there's going to be injuries in this game. So Josh Simmons is probably the last guy you wanted to see hurt, especially, in the Oregon game. They had to win despite having less than Josh Simmons' offensive line play. I think Zen Michalski stepped in and did an honorable job given the circumstances. Lettermen Row was in Eugene. It's the loudest environment I've ever been in, and I've been to the Big House for those Ohio State Michigan games that Michigan has won. The Penn State games are really, really loud, but Autzen Stadium was as loud as I've ever heard a stadium. And Zen did have the false start. I thought there were a couple plays where he let up some pressures. I didn't think he played poorly. It just wasn't what you expect out of Josh Simmons. So now you have to go pick up the pieces. Zen Michalski, Ryan Day said, we're going to go with Zen for now, but we'll keep backup plans. Ryan Day did say that Donovan Jackson was an option there, unprompted, because the Ohio State Radio Network's Jim Lachey said, a few different names of options that they could go with. Ryan Day said, we'll go with Zen for now, but he did mention Donovan Jackson's name unprompted, which I think is interesting that Ohio State will likely at least explore that. I don't know if you want to upset the apple cart on the interior of the offensive line. They're running the football really well through 6 games, and the interior has a lot to do with that. But if there is more depth at one spot, it is that interior. So do we see Donovan Jackson get some run there at left tackle and try that out, and then have, Ategra Shabola and Austin Serapult in the game at the guard spots? Luke Montgomery is a guy who's, Ryan Day said, is quote unquote ready to roll at guard. Could he step in at left guard and Donovan Jackson go out to left tackle? I think they would like to see what they have in Zen Mahalski moving forward. And if push comes to shove and you have to, they might be able to dip into that Donovan Jackson package and see if they can get him ready to play at left tackle at a championship level. He's playing at an All-American level at guard right now. So you don't want to have that happen, but you also didn't want to lose Josh Simmons for the year. Now you have, in all likelihood. And so you have to figure out what you're going to do from here. It's not ideal. But that's, I hate to start the show on a somber note too, because there's a lot to like. And I know some Ohio State fans won't want to hear this. There's a lot to like from the game against Oregon from this Ohio State team. The next thing I wanted to touch on from what Ryan Day said, Will Howard has a lot to build off of. I don't know if enough people realize this, because the final play and the final sequence got so much attention. Will Howard was incredible on Saturday night against Oregon. 28 of 35, 326 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 80% completion, quarterback rating of 177.1. He also had 9 attempts for 13 yards and a touchdown on the ground. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it was good when he did run. He had the touchdown run on the first drive of the game, just barreling through. He had a 6-yard gain. He had another 6-yard gain in the fourth quarter that helped keep a drive going. I just thought he was really, really good throughout the game, and it's a shame that it gets clouded by the final sequence and the slide and trying to get that timeout. But I thought Will Howard was really, really good, and Ryan Day seemed to agree. He said that Will Howard is hurting right now. After the game and things like that, the way it ended, Ryan Day said, I did think he competed. I thought he made some really good throws, and I think there's a lot of things that he can build confidence on moving forward coming out of that game, as much as that game hurt. Nobody was more cut up about that game afterward than Will Howard. And I think that, you saw the fire in him. You saw the competitive nature, trying to make a play there at the end, and then feeling like he let his team down. I'm glad that Ohio State fans aren't completely blaming the loss on Will Howard not getting down. There's a lot of blame to go around everywhere, and I certainly don't think it lies on Will Howard just trying to make a play at the end of the game, especially when, you probably should have had 10 seconds instead of 6 because of the 12-minute penalty that's, of course, been changed now, but it doesn't really do you any good to change it now because it's already affected potentially the outcome of a game before the NCAA acted, and that's not an excuse. Obviously, Ohio State had plenty of chances to win that game in other areas, but it would have been nice to have those 10 seconds instead of those 6 seconds on the clock. A couple other things I thought were interesting that Ryan Day mentioned about the loss to Oregon is you've got to win the he said, quote unquote, you've got to win the turnover battle. We didn't win the turnover battle, and we didn't win the rushing yards. We gave up too many explosive plays. Those things have to get fixed. Turnovers, rushing yards, explosive plays. In the losses to Michigan, it's been explosive plays and the turnover battle, especially last year with the 2 interceptions. Michigan didn't turn the ball over. The Georgia game, it was explosive plays and the rushing yards. Ohio State didn't run the ball well enough. This game, Ohio State was 0 for 3 in those opportunities. 2-0 on turnovers. Ohio State turned the ball over twice. One of them was the Quinshon Judkins fumble. The other one obviously was the kickoff that Oregon hit right at Caleb Downs and then fell on it, to recover a fumble on a really heads-up play by the Ducks. So Ryan Day did say Ohio State had prepared for that. They were practicing for it, and Oregon just made a play. And, that's one of those ones where you can drill it as many times as you want, but once it happens in a game, it's almost still a fluke because it just happens so fast. And if it doesn't bounce off of Caleb Downs and go directly back toward Oregon, Ohio State probably jumps on that because they had guys in every other direction. But that's just the way the ball bounces. You got an unlucky bounce there. on that. The Quinshon Judkins fumble, an unacceptable fumble. You can't fumble like that. You already have a 1-score lead. And then you have a chance to go up 2 scores. The other one that I think was the other one I think that was inexcusable was the Will Howard 3rd and 3, where the snap hit him in the hands, a perfect snap by Seth McLaughlin. He just wasn't paying attention to the snap. Ohio State looked like it was really getting ready to move the ball there, put the foot on the gas. It was 28-22 Ohio State. It was the second time in the game that they had a 1-score lead, could have pushed it to 2 scores, and did not because of a mental error. The first one, obviously, was the Judkins fumble. You're up 7-0. You're deep back in your own territory. Can't fumble there. You're already up a score. If you don't fumble there and you have something good happen, you go up by 2 scores on the road and silence that crowd really early. The second time, you're up 28-22. You just got a goal line stand, and then you're moving the ball really well. A couple nice strikes from Will Howard, a really nice pass on a slant route to Emeka Ibuka. You're moving the ball well. It's 3rd and 3. You've got a mesh route, a mesh concept that you think that you're going to be able to extend the drive on and go down and maybe put it to a 2-score game late in the second half, and it just hits off of his hands. It becomes a 3rd and long or a 4th and long, and Ohio State has to punt. Those are backbreakers on the road, man. You've got to be able to capitalize when you've got a 1-score lead and you've got the ball. That killer instinct I thought was lacking a little bit from Ohio State on Saturday night, and I wonder if we'll be able to get some insight into Ryan Day to see if he agrees with that, or if that's just kind of the way the ball bounces sometimes. Because there is something to that, I think. Those errors can't happen. That's the bottom line. They can't happen, especially the one where it goes off of Howard's hands, where it's a perfect snap. All right, let's get to some questions. I want this to be a question show. We've got an hour to fill. If we don't fill the hour, that's fine, but we've got an hour if you guys want. Was it CJ Hicks or Caleb Downs? Okay, so, yeah, a little inside baseball here. In the press box, we were told that it was CJ Hicks by a member of the by Ohio State, the communication staff, because normally CJ Hicks puts on one of the extra jerseys, borrows a jersey, and is in there. This was the hands team, and Ryan Day confirmed after the game that Caleb Downs is on the hands team. It was Caleb Downs. It was not CJ Hicks. So there was some confusion there, but it was Caleb Downs. It was not CJ Hicks. Yeah, he did try to jump over it. Yeah, it was an interesting strategy. I thought that maybe he could have reduced the surface area, turned a little bit more to the side, tried to make that thing evade him rather than him trying to jump over the ball. But again, that almost an unlucky bounce for Ohio State. Not a play that you can just excuse, but also it's one of those things. You almost have to tip your hat to Oregon, in my opinion, on that play. Like, Ohio State saw it coming. They knew it was coming. They put the hands team out there. They did what they were supposed to do. But again, in that moment, it is not an easy play to just to react to once it actually happens and the bullets are flying. All right, let's get to a couple more. Patrick Green. Does Ryan Day and Chip Kelly have a coaching manual on clock management? I don't know if there's a manual. I don't know if it's like blackjack and there's a book that you can just read and say this. But they work so much on clock stuff. We're in there a lot during training camp, and they're working on clock stuff. They're working on situations all week during practice. Obviously, you would want the clock management to be better. And I think there are questions that have to be asked to Ryan Day and Chip Kelly about the clock management from Saturday night, particularly because on the Jeremiah Smith offensive pass interference that was questionable at best, in my opinion, after that play, some time was running. Once the ball was spotted, the clock did start, and Ohio State wasted, I think, 6 or 7 seconds there that would have been quite valuable there at the end of the game with Will Howard trying to slide and get down in time. But the clock management was not good. I'll leave it at that. I thought that it could have been handled much, much better. Obviously, Dan Lanning, the genius to know. If he did, I'm still questioning whether he knew it. Of course, he's going to say that he knew that they had 12 men on the field. Of course, he's going to claim that after everybody calls him a super genius for 2 days, and then he speaks. I'm still on the fence on whether that was a planned thing or if they just had 12 out there. If they did plan it, it makes sense because they had it in the guy in the exact right spot. to not let Jeremiah Smith beat them deep and to play, press coverage while also being able to defend the deep ball. But there's some questions on whether it was intentional. Those 4 seconds, super valuable. Not out of Ohio State's control, but certainly a one-off play that you don't really expect to get the penalty, and the time comes off the clock. I still don't understand how that was ever a rule. You're not allowed to play with 12. I don't think that it should be if the play starts and there's 12 out there, I don't think that time should come off the clock. I think it should be dead ball 5 yards, almost like a false start where the play just doesn't count, even if the play has happened and people don't hear the whistle. I think the 12 men should be the exact same way. If nothing else, and this sounds like weird, but for a player safety perspective, like 12 on 11 isn't correct. And so I don't know how that was ever a penalty that just allowed the clock to run. And I'm glad the NCAA closed that loophole. That doesn't mean that Dan Lanning didn't exploit the loophole and show some genius there, if in fact he did do it on purpose. And it doesn't mean Ohio State shouldn't have called a timeout when Oregon had 12 and gotten the free 5 yards without running any time off the clock. But then you lose your last timeout, and everyone wonders, scratching their head, why did Ryan Day call a timeout? Oregon was going to be penalized there anyway. I think that it was one of those things where we were probably going to complain about the clock management regardless. And I was really hoping that somebody would come in with this. Should have just ran the ball and kicked the field goal, go home with a win. I get it. I get the point of view. I get the talking point. I get the conversation. We were saying the exact opposite to Ryan Day during the Peach Bowl against Georgia. And it was only 5 yards of difference from where they were. They were at the 33-yard line in the Peach Bowl against Georgia. They were at the 28-yard line against Oregon. And everyone was angry at Ryan Day for running the football and trying to play for a field goal in the final minute against Georgia. And then so he runs the football and he says, yeah, I probably should have passed. Well, you fast forward a year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is, and everyone's angry that Ryan Day didn't run the football when he got down to the 28-yard line and kick the field goal and go home with a win. So it's almost the damned if you do, damned if you don't situation for Ryan Day, because a matter of fact is he did learn from his past mistake. He did decide to stay aggressive and continue to march down the field and get the best possible field goal. And they did get more yardage with Jeremiah Smith. It was offensive pass interference. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Looked like a subjective call, which I think all pass interference calls, most of them are subjective. It's luck of the draw with which official you get and whether they're going to let them play all night and then throw a flag there. Those kind of things happen. The problem with the logic is you should have just ran the ball and kicked the field goal. Is Day was absolutely eviscerated for not getting closer than a 50-yard field goal against Georgia in the 2022 Peach Bowl. And I was among them who thought he should have kept throwing the ball. But now you fast forward a year and a half, and he's getting scolded for not running the football and killing the clock and kicking a long field goal. And so I think they felt more comfortable if the ball was on the 20 to 25-yard line, getting a 35 to 40-yard field goal rather than a 45 to 50-yard field goal. And I don't have any issue with Ryan Day throwing the football and getting it to the 19, 20-yard line with Jeremiah Smith. It just happened that you get a call on a pass interference, and that's not the excuse. It's just that's part of the game. And then you have to play with the cards that you're dealt, which is a 15-yard penalty. I still hate the college football pass interference. I always have, and I always will. How that's a 15-yard penalty. When it's on the defense, I believe it's half the distance to the goal. But when it's on the offense, it's the full 15 yards. I hate that. I think that's a very dumb rule that could be revised. But I've always thought that way. It's not because Oregon won. It's not spilled milk, spoiled grapes, whatever you want to say. But the end of game is something that we're going to run through 1,000 times. And if we've been reading LettermenRow.com, which you all should have membership at LettermenRow.com right now, you should go get that at 50% off at LettermenRow.com. Ryan Day said that he's gone through every play 1,000 times in his head from the loss. He's not going to stop either. He knew that they had Oregon beat. He knew that they had marched down the field and gotten into field goal range. and then they weren't. You could even make the case that he should have kicked a 55-yard field goal or a 56 or whatever it would have been from way back there. But you're leaving that up to chance. Will Howard thought that they could get in field goal range in those 6 seconds. Will Howard thought that he had gotten down in time. Brandon Innes is calling for a timeout. Ryan Day is calling for a timeout, and the clock just wasn't going to cooperate there. You're going to run through those so many times in your head. Like Ryan Day said, 1,000 times in your head. It is what it is. And Ohio State now is 5-1 entering this idle week. Nebraska on deck. They've got a lot of issues to correct. They've got a lot to like, a lot to dislike, some things that they have to pick up, some things that they have to maybe cool off on. So you never want to take a loss, ever, ever, ever. But at the end of the day, there's very few undefeated teams right now in college football. Going undefeated is going to be more and more difficult every year in the 12-team playoff expanded conferences. These conferences are better than they were. I will be very, very surprised if Oregon goes 12-0. I will be even more surprised if they get to 13-0. It is really hard to win all of your games. It's going to be even more difficult to beat a team twice. I believe that Ohio State will see Oregon again in Indianapolis. If it's not Ohio State, it will probably be Penn State, and I think that would be a great game between Oregon and Penn State. So I don't know if there's any of these teams that are going undefeated. I don't know if Texas is going undefeated. I don't know if I know like Georgia, Alabama already have a loss. Tennessee, 2 losses, or already has a loss. It's just not going to come as easy. And that probably sounds a little whiny because Ohio State just did lose, but maybe we should have saw this coming. And I certainly didn't. I thought that Ohio State was going to be the better team, but they weren't on Saturday. Maybe you could make a case that they were, but they weren't. On the scoreboard at the end of the game. Get to a couple more questions. Let's talk about this defense. Should Jim Knowles be on the hot seat? I understand the frustrations with Jim Knowles. The big games have not been kind to Jim Knowles, and they have not been good for Jim Knowles. It's been bad. And we can all admit that it's been bad. I think there is a level of understanding where people are coming from and thinking that Jim Knowles should be on the hot seat, while also giving this year a chance to play out, because there are only 3 games last year between top 10 teams in which the winning team scored fewer than 30 points. There's only 2 in which the winning team scored 20 or fewer, and they were both won by Ohio State, 20-12 against Penn State and 17-14 against Notre Dame. Michigan and Alabama were a part of, I believe, all 3 of the ones that were under 30 points. Michigan scored exactly 30 points against Ohio State to win that game. I don't need to remind you guys of that one. Alabama beat Georgia 27-24 in the SEC championship game. Michigan beat Alabama, I believe, 27-24 or 27-20 in the Rose Bowl. Other than that, all of the games between top 10 teams have 30 points or more. That's not an excuse. The Ohio State defense was not good enough. I also think there's some truth to the fact that these games between top 10 teams are just offense-heavy games. The defenses are good. The offenses are better. Some of these top 10 shootout games are becoming more and more. They are becoming shootouts. Even the best defenses in the country, if you get in a top 10 battle, it's more than not likely going to be a shootout. If Ohio State and Oregon play again, I would expect these offenses to win out again. That's not an excuse for Jim Knowles at all, though. They have to be better in these big games. They do. No turnovers forced for, I think, the 3rd straight top 3 matchup. No ability to rush the passer, and some questionable means to try to rush the passer. Not acceptable. The yardage given up, the way that the corners played, there's a lot of things that I do not think were good enough with Jim Knowles. With that being said, if this team fixes its mistakes on defense, and I think that's going to be a tough ask and a big ask, because there are quite a few things that I think they need to do as far as the pass rush is concerned, as far as figuring out how best to deploy this secondary, how best to use the pieces that they have at their disposal, as long as they stay healthy. If this team turns it around And I don't even know if you can say turn it around. They're still number 4 in the country in stop rate. They just didn't stop Oregon in the fourth quarter. It's been a theme of these big games. You're not getting enough stops in the fourth quarter. If they beat Penn State and they win the rematch against Oregon and they go out and they get to the college football playoff and play in the semifinal or the final, and you're in a shootout and you win even if you don't win the national championship, but you go to the national championship game and your defense looks good, I don't think that Jim Knowles is going to be on the hot seat. I think that would be means to bring him back. If these defensive issues continue in these big games, whether that be November 2nd in Happy Valley, whether that be against a ranked Indiana team that looks like it's pretty high flying and potent on offense, whether that's against a Michigan team that doesn't have an offensive pulse right now, if Ohio State struggles in that game, the Big Ten championship game, if it's a repeat and we just see Evan Stewart and other Oregon players just blowing by these Ohio State corners, and then you still get in the playoff and the defense doesn't look like it can hang in a big game. Yeah, I think there's going to be some really tough decisions that Ryan Day is going to have to make about this staff. And I think there's going to be some tough decisions that everybody's going to have to make. So it's one of those things where I understand if you think that Jim Knowles, Buckeye 80, should be on the hot seat, but I'm not putting him there yet because I want to see how this season finishes out. I'm not putting anybody on the hot seat right now. They lost by 1 on the road to a top 5 team. Is that probably a little too optimistic? Maybe. But I'll pay to see the rest of this season before I decide that people need fired, much like I usually wait till the end of the recruiting cycle to decide whether somebody was successful on the trail or not. So that's just my philosophy. I'll wait until at least the last week in November after we have Thanksgiving, and then we'll talk about the changes that need to be made on this coaching staff. It's what I did last year with the coaching staff. I think it's fair to see if they can make in-season adjustments. This is the first adversity this team has gone through all year. I know you can point to a couple drives against Marshall. You can point to some stuff against Michigan State. No, this is the real adversity. Well, how they bounce back from this will tell us a lot about this team. And I just wonder if it doesn't get corrected. If it doesn't get corrected, then we'll talk hot seat. If some things get changed and Ohio State starts to hum again on defense, then you're thinking, okay, they're able to adjust at halftime. Why can't they adjust mid-season? We're at exactly the mid-season point, and they have an off week. A lot like halftime, if you really think about it that way. Ohio State's outscored opponents 91-3 in the third quarter this season. Why? Because they're great when they go to the locker room. They're great when they get on the whiteboard at halftime. This coaching staff, I think, is elite at making halftime adjustments. Now, whether those adjustments last all the way through the fourth quarter, we can have that talk. But the third quarter is ridiculous showing of how good they are at understanding what they're seeing in the first half and adjusting to it. I think Knowles has to be a little better about adjusting on the fly and not waiting until halftime to make some of these adjustments. As we saw on Saturday night, Oregon got a couple deep touchdowns on Ohio State in the first half, and Ohio State was slow to adjust to them. The second half, Oregon had a punt, a turnover on downs, and 2 touchdowns. Or a punt, a turnover on downs, a touchdown, and the game-winning field goal with 1:52 to go. So they're really good at making those halftime adjustments. Can they make that half-season adjustment? And that's what I want to see from Jim Knowles. If no is the answer at the end of the year, we'll talk about what the future is for this Ohio State defense. If yes is the answer, then we'll probably be talking about it over a big, shiny gold trophy that the folks in Ann Arbor just got last year. Ohio State might get to add one to their trophy case. So I'm going to wait and see to the end of the season. I'm not going to make that judgment just yet, but I understand where the frustration is from the fan base with where Jim Knowles is. And I hope that's a good conversation that, you can use to kind of, I don't know, level your head. Or maybe if you're gung-ho about firing Knowles and you think, Spencer, you're an idiot, that's fine. Just tell me in the comments, because the comments help us out advance the Lettermen Row brand. So as long as you're leaving comments and asking questions, we can keep doing these things every Thursday. And next week, Andy Backstrom will be back with me to talk about this stuff. And I'm sure he'll have a lot to say about Nebraska moving forward, but also a little bit more as we continue to break down what went wrong in Eugene on Saturday night. Another good point, need more rotation from the defensive line. I've got a story coming out at lettermenrow.com on Friday morning that talks about the potential of playing Caden McDonald more. I thought that Caden, a second-year guy, has steadily shown that he can handle a good dose of playing time for Ohio State. I don't know if he's been perfect. I think he's been the best non-Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton of all of the defensive tackles. And so if he can play some nose tackle snaps and get some good run and continue to show that he's going to be the big man in the middle of the future for Ohio State on the defensive side of the ball, I think that he should play more. And so maybe that the rotation comes in. You don't want to take Ty Hamilton off the field. He's been really good this year. The AP just had him as a midseason second-team All-American, which I think is awesome. He's finally getting some credit that he deserves, some of that credit that his brother didn't really get either during his time at Ohio State. So, he's been good. You don't want to just completely play other guys over him. And Tyleik Williams is obviously one of the best defensive tackles in college football. You don't want to just play guys for the sake of rotating. But I think that Caden McDonald is a name to know who has earned that and who has earned a little bit of trust from the coaching staff that he can go out there. Other guys on the defensive line, Jason Moore, I think, played more snaps than he's normally playing in these bigger games. Hero Kanu played a couple snaps. I think those guys still have a little ways to go. I'm pretty high on both of them long-term and into the future for Ohio State. But there were a couple of moments, particularly at the end of the first half, where the second-team defensive line was in there, and I thought the starter should have been in there before you get a 20-minute intermission going into halftime. I just think that there are times to rotate in, and there are times to have your brightest and best, I guess, out there. And in the first half, especially toward the end, they did look a little tired. But I think that your first teamers should have been in there. And there were times that they weren't. The other guy on the defensive line that I thought played pretty well is Caden Curry. Caden Curry, high motor. We've been saying that since Berman and I used to talk about him on the recruiting trail when we were still talking recruiting together. The motor does not stop with Caden Curry. And he hasn't played 20 snaps in any game this year. He's played more than 10, but fewer than 20 in every game. Does that change? Can he be a guy who gives you more than 20 snaps and provides a spark for this defensive pass rush that, quite frankly, they need? No sacks against Oregon. I thought the pass rush was decent against Iowa, but it didn't come really until the second half. They weren't getting to the passer particularly great, even though the pressure rates and the advanced numbers and the PFF and the sports information solution all says that they're a great pass rushing unit. It doesn't pass the eye test. I mean, I'm just being honest. It does not pass the eye test. They've got to be better up front. And so is Caden Curry a guy who you can lean on to get you some of that production from your pass rush? He's in there on the Rushman package. I think you could see him on standard downs, maybe a couple more plays than he's gotten. Yeah, the defensive line looked tired. Maybe if they would have eaten their Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce. Wendy's nugs are good dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce, Buckeye 80? Have you? Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love, and they turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker, try the spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before for a whole new way to nug. It's got to be Wendy's. Which brings us to the Wendy's saucy nug of the week. Ohio State on the bye week, the idle week, whatever you want to call it. And Ryan Day is 10-3 off the bye week straight up. That's pretty good. Obviously, I believe that includes long-term breaks such as bowl games. Ryan Day 10-3 at Ohio State off the bye week straight up. You got to like Ohio State against Nebraska next week. I think Ohio State is going to come out very angry. Maybe last week was a little bit of a reality check for this team. Ryan Day said that it was not. And he said that they've been working hard all year. They're going to continue to work hard. He said that this was not a wake-up call, I think is the word that he used, wake-up call, not reality check. But once you do lose a game, there is a sense of, now we've really got to lock in. If we lose another one, maybe we don't go to the college football playoff. And this season that was supposed to be so magical and storybook ending for so many of these guys, collecting a pair of gold pants, finally winning the Big Ten, finally hoisting the national championship trophy that they all came back to do. Those things can still slip away. And so, yeah, maybe the game in particular wasn't a reality check or wasn't something that Ohio State has to use as a wake-up call, but it can be, and maybe the Buckeyes will use it as such moving forward. you have to like what they're going to do against Nebraska, especially because Nebraska wants to throw the ball down the field, and Ohio State has a lot to prove about its down the field passing defense. And I think the Buckeyes will come out trying to make sure that they show something to prove against Nebraska moving forward next week. If you have a question, throw it down in the comments. Would love to answer some more questions from y'all. Talking Ohio State versus Oregon, talking Ohio State the second half of the season. I did do some second half or some first half of the season superlatives over at lettermenrow.com. I'm going to get into a couple of those here. We can talk freshman tracker if there's any freshmen that you've got questions about halfway through the season. Some of these guys on the track to redshirt. Some of these guys are maybe going to redshirt, playing on that 4-game threshold or kind of riding on it right now. And then there's a few guys who have already played their allotment. They can't redshirt. They're going to be a part of this program all the way through to the end of the season and then, become the future stars of this Ohio State team. So there's a lot of directions we can go. I'd like to take it whatever direction the comments go. Let's go with first half superlatives. I'm going to talk about what I named. We can do some biggest surprises too. The best win, obviously 35-7 over Iowa. Shutting down Caleb Johnson, I thought was the high point for this rush defense so far this season. Didn't have their best stuff against Oregon. Jordan James, really good running back. Caleb Johnson might be one of the top 5 best running backs in America. He was completely shut down. He had the long touchdown runs, 2 28-yard runs, one against the first team, one against the second team. Other than that, absolutely nothing doing. I thought that was a great win for the Buckeyes, which we thought was going to set the tone for the Oregon game. Obviously, that didn't happen. But the best win was the 35-7 to win over Iowa. The best play, you guys know it. It was the Jeremiah Smith one-handed touchdown grab. Maybe it should have been the one right before that where he snagged one with one hand while getting his face mask pulled by the Michigan State defender. But we went with the touchdown grab. That play changed the game. Ohio State had a 10-point lead, and it was a little rocky at best. That catch made it 24-7. Will Howard comes back in, and Ohio State absolutely dominated the second half of that game. Best newcomers for Ohio State, I have Seth McLaughlin on the offensive side and Caleb Downs on the defensive side. You can debate the offense especially. I'm not sure if there's much of a debate on the defense. Downs has been everything Ohio State hoped he would be and more. I thought he was fantastic even against Oregon. He's been fantastic all year. He does not have the stats that he had at Alabama last year. Newsflash, Alabama was not that great defensively last year. So what did Caleb Downs have to do? He had to play and run support a lot. He had to tackle because their linebackers weren't that great. He doesn't have to do a lot of the same things that he did at Alabama. So his stats don't look great. The advanced numbers love him. The people who watch the games and understand the odds and ends of this Jim Knowles defense love what Caleb Downs has brought. He's been the bona fide best newcomer on that defense. Seth McLaughlin, CBS Sports midseason All-American, The Athletic midseason All-American, AP midseason All-American. He is on track to get a tree at Buckeye Grove. I think that's super impressive for a guy who was doubted and ran out of town from Tuscaloosa at Alabama. For those low snaps, we haven't seen those. I heard all throughout the offseason that it was a Jalen Milroe issue. It was not a Seth McLaughlin issue. That's played itself out completely with Seth here at Ohio State with Will Howard. He's been really good, and he's getting the nod for midseason All-American. He's the best newcomer on the offense. Could have went, obviously, Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins. Tried to stay away from Jeremiah because I gave him best play, trying to get some variety in this. But, I think that Seth has earned that. Biggest disappointment, the pass defense. We thought that this was going to be the number one unit in the country like it was last year. And the reality, guys, is that they've given up 1,002 yards of passing and 4 passing touchdowns in the first 6 games this season. Last year, they gave up 926 passing yards and 4 touchdowns through the air in 6 games. It's only about an 80-yard difference. It just looks different. It does not look the same. It's not been the same pass defense that we expected. And quite honestly, we expected more from it than we saw last year, even though they were the top unit in America last year. So maybe we shouldn't have expected that. Maybe we should have expected a drop off, but I don't know where that expectation would have come from. So I would say that right now, the pass defense has been the biggest disappointment. And then the biggest question mark, we talked about it at the beginning of the show. Rewind this 30 minutes and sit back and enjoy the entire conversation if you haven't yet. How will the Josh Simmons injury impact the Buckeyes? We talked about that at the beginning of the show. I'm not going to go back over that. I don't want to repeat myself, and you guys don't want to hear me repeat myself right now. I would say the biggest pleasant surprise has been the run game. They've really done a great job with the run game. I know it got sidetracked against Oregon. I think that has a lot to do with the injuries up front. I think they had to change some things and didn't get the run game back on the train tracks that they wanted it to be on to move forward. I would expect a heavy dose of the run game, especially with Josh Simmons now out. You've got a question at left tackle. You've got some offensive line shuffle going on. I think you're going to rely on that run game a little bit more. Chip Kelly's going to show off that creativity, and we're going to see more from this run game at Ohio State moving forward. Who do I think will win the national championship? Right now, I think it's going to be Texas. But there's a great argument for, I think, 3 teams to win the national championship. I think Texas has a great argument. I think Oregon has a great argument. I'll go 4. I think Alabama, if they get their defensive issues squared away, and I think Ohio State, because those are the 4 that when they are playing at their best are just so good. And I saw that Ohio State would be favored over Oregon on a neutral field. If they played right now, I think I would probably take the Buckeyes. They just lost by 1 in the most hostile environment I've ever seen on the road. So if they were playing in Columbus, I think Ohio State might win that game. If they're playing on a neutral field, I think it would be fantastic. I hope we get to see it again. Ohio State, Texas, I hope we get to see that game at some point. Texas has been fantastic, even without their first 5 running backs or whatever running back they're on now. They've still been able to run the football. They're playing good defense. They haven't played an offense with a pulse yet this season. I think the best offense they've played might be Mississippi State, which is an indictment on the schedule that they've played from an offensive perspective. We're going to learn a lot about their defense this week against Georgia, because I think Georgia, has some dudes there on offense that can make you sweat. So, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, and then Alabama. Alabama's got that gear still. If they turn it on and you can't defend Jalen Milroe in the run game, and they get some of these young guys in the secondary figured out and squared away, playing confident, I think you're going to see the second half of the season Alabama show that it's still one of the very best teams in the country. I think those 4 are probably my top choices. Right now, I would say Texas, but if you ask me tomorrow, I might say Oregon. If you ask me on Saturday, I might say Ohio State. And if you ask me on Sunday, I might say Alabama, depending on what happens in that Alabama-Tennessee contest. So, we'll see what the weekend has. Texas hosts Georgia. Alabama goes to Tennessee. Those should be 2 fantastic, fantastic football games. They're going to be all over lettermenrow.com on Friday, because we're going to do games that Ohio State fans should be watching, should be paying attention to for the Buckeyes' sake, as they now enter the 1-loss conversation with the CFP conversation, the 12-team thing, the 12-team deal, now just becoming more at the forefront, as Ohio State no longer has the upper hand in the Big Ten. So now you got to worry about at-large bids, things like that. So, we'll see. But right now, I'd say Texas, Ed. If you made me pick my national title pick, who should start at linebacker? I thought the linebackers. I thought maybe I would change my mind after the rewatch. I rewatched the game. I thought the linebackers were good. I don't think they were perfect, but if you asked me to pin blame anywhere on the defense, the linebackers would be the last people that I would point fingers at. Cody Simon was pretty good. I thought Sonny Styles continues to play well after his couple game lull there, where he didn't look like he was really fitting at linebacker there for a little bit. He looks like he's starting to turn it on and become a good player there in the teeth of that defense at linebacker. I liked what I saw from Sonny Styles and Cody Simon. Arvell Reese, I don't know if he's ready for a game like the Oregon game, and I don't know if he's built for that kind of game anyway. CJ Hicks, I still think, has a ways to go as he's continuing to develop. I like Gabe Powers as a potential guy who at some point in his career will have a big role in this Ohio State defense. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and stick with the 2 guys who have been playing. I thought that they were certainly not the problem and were actually probably the bright spot on Saturday night against Oregon there in Autzen. So, yeah, I think I think I'm just going to stick with the two who have been uh, starting. I don't. Indiana can beat Nebraska. I think. I think Indiana can beat Nebraska. I don't know if they will beat Nebraska. Nebraska's got a really good front seven compared to what Indiana has up front. I'm still curious about the Indiana offensive line. And then, I know it's a small sample size, but Curtis Rourke did turn the ball over twice early in that Maryland game. And then the Hoosiers came back and destroyed Maryland. Man, if you do that against better teams, they're going to make you pay. And I think Nebraska's defense is the kind of defense that can make you pay. Raiola can beat you over the top. We'll see. I think that's going to be a fun game. I don't know if I'll be completely locked in on it because there's a lot of good football on all weekend. This is one of my favorite weekends of the year, and we get to sit around and watch because Ohio State's not playing. I wish Ohio State was playing. There's nothing that I would want more than to be in the horseshoe on Saturday, but this is a pretty dang good consolation prize if we're being honest with ourselves. And I know that it's going to be hard to watch college football still with that bad taste in your mouth from the Ohio State Oregon game. I get it. There's so many people who were disappointed with how Saturday went, but there's a lot of football left to be played. It starts this weekend. There's a ton of college football left to be played, and not Michigan, Illinois. We're going to get into all those games here in about 5 minutes. I'll go 5 more minutes if anybody's got any more questions on the Buckeyes. There's a lot to break down. One guy that I did want to mention on this show as we move forward into a Josh Simmons list, Ohio State offensive line, a Will Kacmarek list, Ohio State offense. He's been a great run blocker for the Buckeyes this year. He really has. Will Kacmarek, the Ohio University transfer, came in, splits time as the starting tight end with G. Scott Jr. He's been a great addition from a run blocking point of view. And that's going to need to be replaced. You cannot run the football without your tight ends in this offense. One of the guys that I've got my eye on is Bennett Christian, a third-year tight end who was suspended all of last year, used that time he was forced to the scout team where he had to block Jack and JT and Kenyatta and Caden and some of these really skilled defensive ends for an entire year as a scout team tight end. And Saturday against Oregon, I thought he fit in nicely. I thought he did a good job. He wasn't, I don't know if he was expecting that role. Obviously, with Will Kacmarek going down on the third play of the game on that 32-yard catch from Will Howard, that's still kind of, was it a catch? Was it not? I don't know. That's for you to decide. I know Ohio State will take what they could get there, and what they got was 32 yards on a Will Kacmarek reception. But I think the folks at Oregon are still thinking that one might not have been full possession before that Oregon guy grabbed it out of his hands. But anyway, I liked what I saw from Bennett Christian. I think he's a guy to watch moving forward. He's the kind of guy that's not afraid to get physical, dirty, put his hand in the dirt. He said run through somebody a few different times during his preseason media availability. I'm anxious to see how he does because I think he's going to have to be an integral part of this offense moving forward, especially from a run blocking perspective. And Ohio State, I think Ohio State will have some plans for this tight end group to be more active in the passing game. G. Scott over the middle was really nice. It was a good wrinkle on Saturday. I don't think Oregon was ready for that. The Buckeyes threw to him a couple times, and he was able to have some success there. So I wouldn't be surprised to see G. Scott and Bennett Christian and a guy like Jelani Thurman if he decides that he's ready to step into a bigger role and take some and take on one of these roles. If they start to see some more in the passing game, Bennett Christian is a guy for Ohio State fans, if you don't know, should have your attention and be somebody that you're watching moving forward as they go into Nebraska and then into the rest of the slate. Obviously, that Penn State game is huge. I think that's the biggest game remaining on the schedule. You can disagree with me. I would listen to an argument that the Michigan game is the biggest game for Ryan Day, for legacy, for these seniors being on senior day in the horseshoe, for 3 years, for Connor Stallions, however you want to spin it. I understand the rivalry. I grew up with the rivalry. I have not been a part of the rivalry because I didn't play at Ohio State. I didn't go to Ohio State. I understand the rivalry, but I think the Penn State game is the one where you're going to learn a lot about the Buckeyes during that Penn State game in a few weeks. And I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I guess I don't want to put the Nittany Lion before the Cornhusker, but that Penn State game obviously is going to be massive because if Ohio State wins that game, you're back in the driver's seat to get to the rematch against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. If Ohio State loses that game, you would have to see Oregon lose a couple times. You have to see Penn State lose, I think, 3 times just to get over a tiebreaker and to get to Indianapolis. That's not going to happen. And so you'll find out if this team's going to play in Indianapolis here pretty quickly in the Big Ten championship game, or if it's going to stumble through the season and it's going to be a lost season almost compared to what we thought this could be. So yeah, I mean, I hope that's not too doom and gloom. I hope there's some rational thought in there for you guys. I've now been talking for 50 straight minutes. So if you enjoy this, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Andy Backstrom will be back to talk with me next week. We've got the Tim May Show. We've got a lot coming at lettermenrow.com. The last few minutes of the show, we always take the opportunity for Sage, Ohio to talk some ball around the country. Michigan, Illinois. I don't know. Who do you have? I don't know how to pick this game. Is Jack Tuttle good at quarterback? I don't know. Can Illinois stop the run game from Michigan? I don't know. Is Michigan's defense getting better other than Will Johnson and Mason Graham and Josiah Stewart, who I think are 3 of the best 10 defensive players in the Big Ten and maybe in the country? I don't know. I think Illinois will probably have some success throwing the football because Luke Altmaier, I think, is a pretty good quarterback, but we'll see. I think I lean Michigan winning that game, but it's a home game for Illinois. They're honoring a 100-year anniversary of Red Grange. They're wearing some really wacky uniforms that I don't think I like, but I don't know if I hate. So Illinois' got a lot going for them in this game. I just don't know if they're going to have enough to not only stop Michigan, but to stop Michigan consistently. Let's go to some other games. Oregon at Purdue. I mean, it doesn't get more of a Purdue house of horrors than 6 days after you just get the biggest win in program history. You got to turn around, go on the road for a night game against the Spoilermakers, right? If the Big Ten gods want a proper baptism for Oregon, they will be dumped in the Wabash River at the hands of the Boilermakers. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I hope that metaphor worked. Yeah, I think Oregon's going to be fine, but man, going on the road to play Purdue on 6 days rest after the biggest win in program history, that's got to be an uneasy feeling. But I think Oregon's going to be just fine. I don't think that Purdue team's any good at all, even with the backup quarterback now being the starter. Miami at Louisville. I actually think Louisville's going to win this game. Miami's been playing with fire way too much. Cam Ward, as fun as he is an absolute roller coaster. You guys all remember him from when Ohio State. We got an Oregon fan in here. I'm glad there's still Oregon fans hanging around. The Oregon fans, for what it's worth, were awesome on Saturday. I talked to quite a few of them. I ate at a good place in Eugene. Enjoyed my time in the Pacific Northwest. Oregon fans were fantastic. So they're a welcome addition to the Big Ten. Obviously, Ohio State wants to beat them. I think we'll see that game again in December. Yeah, Georgia, Texas, Sage, Ohio. Give me Texas. I think Texas is really, really good. And I think there's some issues with this Georgia offense. Texas has got athletes everywhere. They look like what Georgia used to look like, in my opinion, a couple years ago. So I'll take Texas at home in Austin. I think that's going to be a crazy atmosphere, even though I've always heard, I've never been, but I've always heard that DKR down there in Austin isn't the loudest or most intimidating environment. But we'll see. We'll see what they've got in store for Georgia. Nebraska, Indiana is the game I think every Ohio State fan should be locked in on at noon on Saturday. I'm actually going to take Nebraska in that game. There's not betting advice. But I don't think Indiana's bad. But look at who Indiana's played. They're not playing a murderer's row of opponents there. And I just think that eventually they're going to stumble, and Nebraska, it might be this week that Nebraska gets them. I'm also going to take Alabama on the road at Tennessee. As much as I don't like this Alabama team, the way that they're playing, I like them when they're revving at the top gear, like when they were up so big on Georgia there in the first half. I don't like this Tennessee offense. I think Nico Iamalieva's not playing the way that everybody thought he would. So I will take Alabama in that game. Michigan, Illinois, we already talked about. Oh, yeah, the Battle of the Bricks, Ohio, Miami. The Bobcats play Miami. That's my alma mater. I will be cheering very hard for the Bobcats on Saturday. That is a huge, huge rivalry game in the MAC. Some terrific bragging rights coming up for that one. Very excited to watch it. I will be locked in on it. I know there are so many good college football games on, especially in that 3:30 window, but I got to give a shout out to my Bobcats. Hopefully they can get a win on the road in Oxford and send everybody back to their dorm rooms. Pretty sad there in Oxford. I'm really intrigued by this USC Maryland game. One of these teams has to get off the mat. Both of these teams look like they suck. We'll see. I'm not going to pick it. I'm intrigued by it. Might be like a loser starts to quit on the season type of game. Trojans have to go all the way to College Park. Maryland just got drubbed at home by Northwestern. It's ugly stuff for both of those programs right now. I'm just not loving the vibes. The vibes are bad. Colorado, Arizona, please watch some of this. No, Sage, Ohio. I went to Ohio. I'm a Bobcat. I would never, ever, 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 ever go to Miami. Colorado, Arizona, watch some of this because Travis Hunter is going to go up against one of the best corners in the country when he's on offense. And then as one of the best corners in the country, he's going to have to defend Tet McMillan, who's probably going to be the first receiver drafted. That's going to be awesome. So I'll be watching a little bit of that with Colorado and Arizona. I don't know who's going to win. Quite frankly, I don't care who's going to win that game. I just think that that's a really cool matchup that's worth paying attention to. Arkansas is going to beat LSU. I just think that's going to happen. And then I think Kentucky's going to win at Florida. So some upsets in there, some cool stuff. This college football slate rules. It's going to be awesome. Ohio State, not a part of it. The Buckeyes are getting back on track, let's say, after the 32-31 loss to Oregon out there in Eugene. Now the Buckeyes rested, recovered. They had 3 or 4 really good practices this week from what I've been told. And then they get a day off. I think Saturday they're going to be off. They got to be back Sunday night. And they go into a normal week preparing for Nebraska, going to keep everything the same and just get back on track. This team is very, very, very good. They're very talented. They have their shortcomings. Ohio State knows about the shortcomings. They're working to correct them. Whether they get them corrected, whether you have faith that they will get them corrected, I guess we just have to wait and see. But again, like we talked about in the middle of this program, I'm going to wait and see. I'm not going to pass judgment on whether Jim Knowles should be on the hot seat. I'm not going to pass judgment on whether Denzel Burke lost all of his money from Saturday night, even though it was the worst game of his career. He knows it, and Ohio State knows it. I'm not going to pass judgment on whether these guys can't handle clock management because of the slide. I want to see the second half of the season because I think that there's talent in the coaching office. I think there's talent on the roster, and it all has to come together. And we get to find out next Saturday the first step in it all coming together after the loss to Oregon. The loss to Oregon did not end this season, and I hope that's what you take away from this hour. The loss to Oregon is a chapter that Ohio State will try to turn the page from and move on. And if this team wins the Big Ten with one loss, I promise you will not care about the Oregon game on the road. It will be a note in this season compared to what a Big Ten championship and potential college football playoff implications will be. Not to say that you shouldn't ever think about this Oregon game again. It will sting everybody for a while at Ohio State. But the goals are still there. Ohio State can accomplish everything it still wants to. A one-loss Big Ten champion is going to be either the 1 or the 2 seed in the college football playoff. Ohio State can still be that. A 2-loss team is going to get into the college football playoff in the Big Ten. Ohio State doesn't want that, but that is still on the table. Ohio State could get to the Big Ten championship game and lose a rematch to Oregon and still probably get in the college football playoff. Every single goal that this team has, beating Michigan, winning the Big Ten championship, and winning the college football playoff national championship, are still in front of this team, and Lettermen Row will be there every step of the way, as we have been for years. Man, that's an hour of Spencer talk, I guess. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I'm Spencer Holbrook. There's nobody on the other side of that screen because this was just me. If you were here for the full hour, I cannot thank you enough. If you're not over at lettermenrow.com, I'm going to ask why not. Go to lettermenrow.com right now. Become a member today. Come join us in the Lettermen Lounge message board. We have a great time. We talk about the Buckeyes. We're rational. We're not fire everybody crowd. We're also not a, everything's going to be fine crowd. I hope to see you guys over there in the Lettermen Lounge. I hope to see you back on the YouTube channel next Thursday as Andy Backstrom and I will break down Ohio State, Nebraska. Have a great college football weekend, and we'll see you guys over at lettermenrow.com. This was just Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's.